Alright, so here I have a copy of the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Medicine, and I'm reading Chapter 1, The Universal Truth, which is describing the development cycles, and I'll also talk about my hypothesis of physical immortality. Okay, Chapter 1, The Universal Truth. In ancient times, the Yellow Emperor, Huangdi, was known to have been a child prodigy. As he grew, he showed himself to be sincere, wise, honest, and compassionate. He became very learned and developed keen powers for observing nature. His people recognized him as a natural leader and chose him as their emperor. During his reign, Huangdi discoursed on medicine, health, lifestyle, nutrition, and Taoist cosmology with his ministers Qibo, Li Gong, and others. Their first discussion began with Huangdi inquiring, "I've heard that in the days of old, everyone lived 100 years without showing the usual signs of aging. In our time, however, people age prematurely, living only 50 years. Is this due to a change in the environment, or is it because people have lost the correct way of life?" Shibo replied, "In the past, people practiced the Tao, the way of life. They understood the principle of balance, of yin and yang, as represented by the transformation of the energies of the universe. Thus, they formulated practices such as Taoyin, an exercise combining stretching, massage, and breathing to promote energy flow, and meditation to help maintain and harmonize themselves with the universe. They ate a balanced diet at regular times, arose and retired at regular hours, avoided overstressing their bodies and minds, and refrained from overindulgence of all kinds. They maintained well-being of body and mind. Thus, it is not surprising they lived over 100 years. These days, people have changed their way of life. They drink wine as though it were water, indulging excessively in destructive activities, draining their jing, the body's essence that is stored in the kidneys, and deplete their qi. They do not know the secret of conserving their energy and vitality. Seeking emotional excitement and momentary pleasures, people disregard the natural rhythm and order of the universe. They fail to regulate their lifestyle and diet, and sleep improperly. So it is not surprising that they look old at 50 and die soon after. And death, we can first assume, is a depletion of jing." End comment. The accomplished ones of ancient times advised people to guard themselves against Zai Feng, disease-causing factors. On the mental level, one should remain calm and avoid excessive desires and fantasies, recognizing and maintaining the natural purity and clarity of the mind. When internal energies are able to circulate smoothly and freely, and the energy of the mind is not scattered, but is focused and concentrated, illness and disease can be avoided. Previously, people led a calm and honest existence, detached from the undue desire and ambition. They lived with an untainted consciousness and without fear. They were active, but never depleted themselves because they lived simply. These individuals knew contentment, as reflected in their diet of basic but nourishing foods, an attire that was appropriate to the season but never luxurious. Since they were happy with their position in life, they did not feel jealousy or greed. They had compassion for others, and were helpful and honest, free from destructive habits. They maintained unshakable and unswayed by temptations, and they were able to stay centered even when adversity arose. They treated others justly, regarding of their level of intelligence or social position. Huangdi asked, "When one grows old, one cannot bear children. Is this due to hereditary or loss of one's procreative energies?" Qibo answered, "In general, the reproductive physiology of women is that at age 7, and this is very important, this goes into the cycles, is that at age 7, that at 7 years of age, her kidney energy becomes full, her permanent teeth come in, and her hair grows long. At 14 years, the Tianqi or fertility essence matures. The Ren/conception vessel and Chong/vital channels are responsible for conception open. Menstruation begins and conception is possible. At 21 years, the kidney energy is strong and healthy, the wisdom teeth appear, and the body is vital and flourishing. At 28 years, the bones and tendons are well developed, and the hair and secondary sex characteristics are complete. This is the height of female development. At 35 years, the yang ming, such stomach and large intestine channels that govern the facial muscles, begin to deplete. The muscles begin to atrophy, facial wrinkles appear, and the hair begins to thin. At 42, all three yang channels, Tai Yang, which is a bladder, Xiao Yang, which is a gallbladder, and Yang Ming, I'm not sure what Yang Ming is, you have to look it up, are exhausted. The entire face is wrinkled and the hair begins to turn grey. At 49 years, the Ren and Chong channels are completely empty and the Tian Kui has dried up. Hence the flow of menses ceases and the woman is no longer able to conceive. In the male, at 8 years of age, the kidney energy becomes full, so males have 8-year cycles, for women have 7. The permanent teeth appear and the hair becomes long. At 16 years of age, the kidney energy is ample, the Tian Kui is mature, and the Jing is ripe, so procreation is possible. At 24 years, the kidney chi is abundant, the bones and tendons grow strong, and the wisdom teeth come in. At the 32nd year, the body is at the peak of strength, and functions of the male are at their height. By 40, the kidney chi begins to wane, teeth become loose, and the hair starts to fall. At 48, the yang energy of the head begins to deplete, the face becomes sallow, the hair grays, and the teeth deteriorate. By 56 years, the liver energy weakens, causing the tendons to stiffen. At 64, the Tian Kui dries up and the Jing is drained, resulting in kidney exhaustion, fatigue, and weakness. When the energy of all the organs is full, the excess energy stored in the kidneys is excreted for the purpose of conception. But now the organs have aged and their energies have become depleted. The bones and tendons have become frail and stiff, and movements are hampered. The kidney reservoir becomes empty, marking the end of the power of conception. Huang Di remarked, "I notice, however, that some people, even though they are quite elderly, can still conceive." Chiba replied, "This is because these individuals inherited an unusual abundance of Jing, and also realize how to lead their lives properly and protect their vitality." At 64 and 49, for males and females respectively, these individuals still have excess kidney energy as well as chi and blood, so they still have the capacity to procreate. However, men past the age of 64 and women past 49 have normally lost this ability. Huang Di asked if a wise one who follows the Tao is over 100 years of age, can he or she still retain the ability to procreate? Chibo answered, "Yes, it is possible. If one knows how to live a correct way of life, conserve one's energy and follow the Tao, yes, it is possible. One could procreate at the age of 100 years. Huang Di inquired, "I have heard of people in ancient times spoken of the immortals who knew the secret of the universe and held yin and yang, the world, in the palms of their hands. They extracted essences from nature and practiced various disciplines such as Taoism and Qigong, and breathing and visualization exercises to integrate the body and mind and spirit. They remained undisturbed and thus attained extraordinary levels of accomplishment. Can you tell me about them?" Chiba responded, "The immortals kept their mental energies focused and refined and harmonized their bodies with their environment. Thus they did not show conventional signs of aging, were able to live beyond biological limitations. Not so long ago, there were people known as achieved beings who had true virtue, understood the way of life. They were able to adapt and harmonize with the universe and seasons. They too were able to keep their mental energy through proper concentration. These achieved beings did not live like ordinary humans who tended to abuse themselves. They were able to travel freely to different times and places, since they were not governed by conventional views of time and space. Their sense perceptions were supernormal, going far beyond the sight and hearing of ordinary humans. They were able to preserve their lifespans and live in full health, such as immortals did. There was a third type of person known as the sage. The sage lived peacefully unto heaven on earth, following the rhythms of the planets and the universe. They adapted to society without being swayed by cultural trends. They were free from emotional extremes and lived a balanced, contented existence. Their outward appearance, behavior, and thinking did not reflect the conflicting norms of society. The sages appeared busy but were never depleted. Internally they were not overburdened. They did not overburden themselves. They abided in calmness, recognizing the empty nature of phenomenological essence. The sages lived over 100 years because they did not scatter and disperse their energies. The fourth type were natural people who followed the Tao and were called naturalists. They lived in accordance with the rhythmic patterns of the seasons, heaven and earth, moon, sun, stars. They aspired to follow the ways of ancient times. Choosing not to lead excessive lifestyles, they too lived plainly and enjoyed long lives. So, let's discuss that. Now, the first interesting part, well, the main interesting part, but one main important part is the cycles of development and how these cycles are pushed by fertility, essentially. So aging and fertility are related, and immortality and health and fertility are related. Essentially, the development of puberty essentially is a development of that fertility base or fertility essence, essentially, which then pushes the body to develop. And as we had seen, it was 8-year cycles in men and 7-year cycles in women. So women develop 1 extra year or quicker, and men develop slower. So when a man is 32, biologically he is at the same age as a 28-year-old woman, while I believe it was a 49-year-old woman or a 56, I think might be 56-year-old woman is a 64-year-old man or something. I don't remember. I have to look that up and do the math. But essentially, that's one thing, and the decline of fertility is a signifier of the decline in health and basically aging. Now, I have noticed this before. There's an idea, it's a little bit of a harsh thing, but it's true. Basically, men don't like infertile, ugly women. To put it simply, to put it very rawly, if a woman looks old and has no fertility essence, just say she's prematurely aged because of this, a man does not find her attractive. While, excuse me, if a woman is older but she retains fertility, her fertility essence, a man generally will still find her attractive. Now, the opposite is true with men. A man who has lost his fertility essence has become weak, and hence, unattractive. Essentially, he's unable to make money, he's unable to work, he's unable to do things, and he looks, he will look ugly because of that. While similarly, if a man may be old, but he may have retained his essence. I saw a person the other day who, I could see they were looked quite young, even though they were 40 years old. So they retained a lot of this, and because of that, they have aged much more gracefully. So if you want to look at like raw biological attraction and raw biological kind of all these things, it's based on fertility. Health is based on fertility ultimately. Now, a lot of the work for immortality is related to things like stem cells, for example. They say if you inject an old person, like a 67-year-old person, with stem cells, then they can start running around, they can start exercising. Just say if they couldn't do this before, that they can after the injection. It's pretty much instant. Like, you know, once it circulates the body, they can do all kinds of things. Of course, it wears off, but stem cells, essentially, it is related to the kidneys. The gonads are kidneys. The gonads are the external kidneys, by the way, and the bone marrow. So the bones is also related to the kidneys, and the marrow is related to the inner part. We talk about marrow essence, essentially, which is just, I believe it's stem cells. I believe they actually draw the stem cells out of the marrow essence into the inner of the marrow, and they inject that into the body, into the bloodstream. That's one way they do it. So through, you know, exercises, you cultivate, instead of doing weird injections or having to take external things, you cultivate it through exercise, meditations, occultic and, you know, qigong-based practices, the use of certain herbs to tonify yourself. You can tonify your water and earth element, and this will definitely make you more, you know, make you age more gracefully and become more fertile. It'll expand the gonads. Now, birth control and its its opposite, which is male testosterone. Because in birth control they have estrogen and this chemical, which bodybuilders will use that chemical that's in the birth control along with testosterone. Now these artificial things, they will age you further. They will age you quicker because it shrinks the gonads for women, shrinks the ovaries, and for men it shrinks the testes, and it affects the kidney. So you will externally, you will look maybe more, you know, feminine or masculine, but you will drain excessive amounts of kidney energy. You're kind of drawing the internal for the external. It's kind of like that marrow injection thing, which is why I say, you know, all these pharmaceuticals like testosterone, HGH, and all that, estrogen, and then the stem cell therapy. I don't really exactly recommend you know, going down that path or anything, but people do use that as kind of like a crude method of not quite immortality, but to have vigor and vitality and fertility and all that in their later years. But what I'm saying is that you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. So we don't want to rob our internals for our externals. And the way to do that, of course, is building up internal energy and then circulating it out. I notice if I build up a lot of internal energy, I can look not the best. You know, maybe I've worked too much and I don't look great, but I feel amazing. I feel internally great, and then I can express that out. And once that blood starts to flow into the skin, one interesting thing is actually if you focus on your face, you'll look more beautiful facially. Yeah, pro tip. I think a lot of people who they're using their brain a lot, they're kind of using their heads a lot more, they look better, facially look better, because there's more blood flow in there. So that's an interesting tip. But what I'm saying is that you build up internal energy and then you express it out, and then physically outwards you'll look better, you look younger if you express it out, while internally you'll feel better if you pull it in. So going back to these cycles, when woman hits 28 and a man hits 32. Now usually fertility wise, if we look at women after about in at least the modern day, because again you have to adjust this for the modern day, some women grow quicker and some grow later. Like some women hit puberty at 12, some hit at around 14. You have to kind of adjust for time, but on average around 25 to 30 is when usually the fertility for women starts to decline. Excuse me. And after 30 it drastically, it just falls down a cliff. And around 35, that's getting into like stillborn, autism, birth defect territory. So, you know, in the past, of course, men would choose women from the cycle of 14 to 21, because that's when puberty would happen, and that's when the puberty, you know, the development, fertility development would start. So men would usually pick women from that age, you know, to avoid birth defects and all that. Now days is a bit different because we push everything forward. We have schooling and university, and people don't really partner up. I think the average age is around 28. Average age for men to marry is around 28 and have a kid. So it's pushed a bit later. So essentially we can see that after 28 that's the peak of development. Now it doesn't have to be the peak, so to speak, as I said, you want to retain your fertility, but a lot of women, and I'll talk about men in a minute, but a lot of women don't. If you look at them at about 30, they got wrinkles, they've got the dark eyes, they just look haggard and just worn and absolutely beaten up, essentially. And it's very ugly. You'll get an instinctual feeling of ugliness. It's because if you're a man, you'll look at a woman and want fertility and beauty. The beauty comes from fertility. And as a woman, you'll look at a man who, just say, if he's lost his fertility, you'll cringe. You'll kind of get that ugly, like, ugh, because you'll feel that he's kind of weak and exhausted and run down, and he's not quite stable. And fertility wise, he's kind of gone. So again, that's why you would look at women. That's why the fertility drops, because after 28 it's a downward cycle. From 28 to 35, that's when things start to go down. Now for men it's 32, so it takes a bit longer for men to develop. You might notice that if you think 16 to 24 for a man is at the start of the sexual development, essentially. So again, sometimes it's earlier, sometimes it's later. I found it was pretty much around that period, and that's kind of the transitional phase for a teenager to a young man. And then 24 to 35, 32 is a transitional phase of a young man to an adult male. So yeah, you'll notice that men, they do kind of develop more slowly. A bit of a pain in the butt, but it is what it is. And after 32, for an average male, that's when the fertility starts to drop. So again, as a man, ideally you don't really want to have children beyond the age of 40, unless you retain your fertility. Because 40 for a man is a woman's 35. The same way you wouldn't really, unless you've already had a bunch of children as a woman and you're very fertile and you're very you got to know your own body. But for just say a woman who hasn't had kids, having one beyond 35 is it's very risky. It can happen, but you're probably going to have a child with a lot of problems. Same way with a man beyond the age of 40. So there's kind of a common held belief that men can have children later, and technically you can, but you're running into the problem of birth defects a lot, which I think we have a lot of birth defects, and there's more reasons for that, like vaccines and chemicals and certain things and improper medical practices and energy of the planet, but definitely because of that. Now again, the rules reverse if you can retain your fertility. So we go back to the kidneys. The kidneys ultimately are the master yang organ of water. The bladder is the master yin organ of water. The gonads are the secondary part. And there are other pieces which relate to it, like the prostate, the perineal area, the womb, the genitals. These kind of relate to it as well. The throat and the back of the head. The water circuits run through the whole body essentially. But it is the degradation of this part, the degradation of the back of the body, essentially, that gets into aging or makes one age. So developing the kidneys, developing the yin of the body will help you to retain that. And you really want to get in touch with your body and feel out your age, feel out what areas of your body is weak and bad, because there is interaction between the organs. So maybe it's not just the kidneys that you have to tonify, maybe it's another organ, in order to support the kidneys essentially. So don't just hyper focus on the kidneys, but ultimately I believe immortality is through that. It's through the retaining of fertility, assuming you're not hit by a car, or even if you are, you're probably strong enough to handle it. If you do, qigong practices like horse stance and all that. But let's just assume you're not, separated in half or something. You're going to keep living, because I don't believe there's a reason for humans to die beyond like biologically. I think we're immortal is essentially what I'm trying to say. If you look at the science, they say the DNA gets worse and worse, the telomeres shrink and all that stuff, and again that's because of this. And they have ideas now which you can lengthen the telomeres and you can repair the DNA, and they do it all through special drugs and special, it's basically just if you eat right, if you exercise, if you sleep correctly, everything gets better, everything's better. Of course you need a little bit more, because modern society is incredibly stressful, and you have to understand your body on an occult level and really understand how to min-max, so to speak, this kind of stuff. Anyway, unless I want to talk in cycles, I figure that's good enough. So I hope you got something from that and it was entertaining and informative. And of course, check the links in the description if you want to, and have a nice day.